How does an awkward meeting in a bathroom turn into a media empire? That's what we're going to learn from Tony Jacobson. He's the founder and CEO of Social Indoor, a media network that's in bars and restaurants throughout the country. And so this is just a perfect story about turning local relationships into a national platform. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Tony Jacobson from Social Indoor, welcome to the leaders list.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are we having you join us from beautiful Minnesota?
Yes, it's a little, it's actually not winter here today. It's rainy and probably in the 70s, but yes, you are correct. I'm in Minnesota.
Wait around for an hour, right? We'll see what happens next.
Snow should be on its way soon. Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're thrilled to have you on because I think you've been Social Indoor. You've had this business for a long time. You've gone through several different maturation stages, and it's just an incredibly cool, easy to understand business. But why don't you tell us a little bit about Social Indoor, and then we'll talk about your journey.
Sure. So Social Indoor is think of a billboard network, if you will. And most people, when they think of billboards, are an outdoor stick in the ground. Our billboards are actually print and digital. However, oddly enough, we place them in restrooms. So they go on the inside stall doors of a women's restroom, a print board. And if you can imagine that, and you close that stall door, if you put a QR code on that, you've got an absolute captive audience, gender specific. Then we also put print boards above the urinals and in the vanities. But most recently, in our biggest drive for sure, is the digital component. And what we're doing is we're putting 22-inch digital monitors that go directly above the urinals. Each one has its own separate IP address. They are all programmatic ready. And then we put them in the women's area in the most available place that's we feel be conducive for viewing, whether it be above the hand dryer or next to the mirror. So we put them in the women's and the men's, and we also complement it with print boards. And we do that in 20 states, and we're currently in about 3,500 venues. Our wheelhouse is really sports bars. However, we've got a ton of different things between arenas, health clubs, fine dining, Mexican restaurants, kind of the whole genre of places where people would go to eat.
Yeah, Tony, it's funny because, I started my first company was touchscreen kiosks in hotels, and then did a ton in mobile marketing. And I always think to myself, like, sometimes you don't have to overthink business. Like, you can make it pretty simple. You're solving a need. You're, communicating with people at the right place at the right time. Tell us a little bit though about how you got started in this. Like what inspired, I don't know how many people went, man, I got to get into the toilet.
Right.
I'm gonna own the bathroom.
Well, first of all, I will say I have apparently found a way to make it not simple, but I'll start from the beginning. So back in 1987, I was going to school at St. Cloud State, and I'm from Hibbing High School, northern Minnesota. And a high school classmate of mine called me, and him and I were both little hustlers in our town, if you will. We grew up in a very small town. My dad was a Culligan man. His dad was a janitor of the high school. But we found odd jobs galore. I mean, we did everything from selling golf balls. Paper routes was sort of my claim to fame. I was one of those crazy paper route carriers that got up at 4 a.m. and subbed everybody's route. And so then I was in a lot of sports and things like that. But he went to school in Fargo. I went to school in St. Cloud. And one day he called me up. His name is Jim Urbanus. He's passed away since, but he called me and said, hey, I got to show you something. So we met over spring break, and he pulled out a magazine. And there was more to the story. He actually invited me into the bathroom at the Country Kitchen restaurant. And I was like, okay. And he had a big black garbage bag, and we're standing in the bathroom, and he pulls out this wood frame that looked like it came right out of a cabin. And behind that frame and behind the glass were 4 clearly cut out magazine ads. And we're standing in the men's room, and he's just holding it up. And he said, what do you think? And I'm like, I think this is nothing but weird. When do we go have breakfast? And
couldn't
so
feel
he said,
more
no, it's
awkward if we
advertising, and it still didn't register. And then he held it over the urinal. He said, now what do you think? I'm like, same weird, right? This is like, it's not translating. So we went back to the table and he pulls out this article, and it was a story of a gentleman who was also going to college in Boca Raton. And back in those days, if you wanted a spring break trip, you'd oftentimes charter your own flight, and then you'd get people, recruit people. So he found that he was putting this out in the student center and the bulletin boards. But once he started putting that message above the urinals in the dorms and inside the stall doors, all of a sudden the plane was sold out so quickly. He was like, holy cow, I'm onto something. So what the article further said is he was going to go put these in all major airlines. And we thought, well, gosh, if he's doing that, let's do all the bars and restaurants. So we took our idea, and his product was a black and white ad. We added color, and our timing was very good because color copiers were just coming out. Unfortunately, he did not. I always kind of joke, it never got off the ground for him with the airlines because some pencil pusher accountant basically weighed the frame, computed it to fuel, and somehow found a way for him to outprice it out of the airlines. But when we took into the bars and restaurants, they were like looking at us like, what is it going to do? And like, first of all, we don't interfere with the atmosphere of your restaurant. We put these ads above the urinals in the men's rooms, inside the stall doors in the women's. You get an in-house ad for yourself. All of the ads are non-competitive. And most importantly, it sort of dresses up your restroom and gives your customers something to read. So it started out that way. It was a crazy concept. That was in the late 80s. And we were actually sort of the inspiration of, we're in the out-of-home industry. But when we started building this out across the country, when the term non-traditional or alternative out-of-home was coined, that was actually referring to restroom advertising.
Interesting. Wow. Not many pitches start in the bathroom, but pretty
Correct.
amazing that you launched an entire category just from that fateful moment. So let's talk about when you got started with this. You're scrappy, you're going through that first stage that we all love and get addicted to, but then you've been at this for a long time. What stage would you say that the business is in today?
I would say we're in a no ceiling stage. Even when I go back to AJ Indoor days, I remember we had one of our early investors, and we were like talking about going into Chicago and New York and LA, and he was like, oh, don't do that. Those are controlled by different elements and everything else. He kind of scared us away. And during that time, we were building out the Midwest. Other companies started building out New York and Chicago, and they sort of became the hip and trendy indoor companies, and we kind of got labeled as the family-friendly Midwest companies, and it was a mistake on our part at that time. And what we learned from that is like, maybe don't listen to, we were in our 20s and he was in his 40s or 50s at the time. It's like, okay, not everybody older than you is right all the time. And now I'm 60, so I've been proven wrong a zillion times. But what we're doing right now is building out a footprint. We're in approximately 55 cities, about 20 states. We are rolling out digital and print, but our concept is a franchise network. So what we're finding is that a market like an Eau Claire or a Waco that's like, say, 150 to 300,000 people, that's an ideal franchise for us, where we can train somebody, they can go back to their market, we'll show them how to lease up 35 to 50 venues, and they can make a nice little low six-figure income. But when you start dealing with these larger markets, as of late, especially in the last couple of years, we've said, you know what, we need to take control of this, because in Minneapolis, I'm in 500 plus locations, and we should be in that many locations in all the top 25 markets. And most individual franchisees don't have the resources or the financial part to do that, because this is pretty cash intensive when you start talking digital. So we've got a number of ways that we're entering these large markets, from investor groups to corporate owned to franchisees, et cetera. But at the end, we're trying to build out something where we'll be in the top 25 cities with 10 to 15,000 venues and 25,000 plus digital monitors out there.
What other alternatives did you consider? Because obviously franchise from a scaling perspective makes a ton of sense. But did you consider doing it on your own? Did you consider bringing in, a finance group to be able to help you expand personally, or what made you land on franchise?
We looked at a lot of things. I would say our business is a high margin business. It's just not a high dollar business, if that makes sense, right? So when you talk about owning these smaller markets, what really got us into the franchise world was in the early 1990s, tobacco got kicked off outdoor. And we got a call from US Tobacco for Skoal chewing tobacco. And they were in Minneapolis and saw our product. And they said, hey, we really like this because it just targets our audience, a male audience in sports bars. And they gave us this list of 12 cities, and we were quite excited because it was like, oh, great, Minneapolis is there. At that time, I think we had a couple hundred locations. And so we took our thermal fax and faxed back our list of Minneapolis. And then they faxed back the 12 cities again. And we said, here's Minneapolis. And they kind of said, hey, knuckleheads, we're US Tobacco. And what is it going to cost for us to open up these markets? And that was sort of our first epiphanies. It's like, maybe not sell what you have, sell what they want. So we ended up having a good sizable contract with that on a 1-year deal. And it allowed us to open up a lot of cities from Winston-Salem to Oklahoma City to Dallas, etc. But what we quickly realized is that once we put those ads up, it didn't really complement because there wasn't a women's product, and one ad itself really doesn't do it either. So cosmetically, it just wasn't the same vibe, although the dollars were there and it was more real dollars than we'd ever seen. But unlike an outdoor billboard company where you can go put a billboard in the ground and you could live in another city because you don't really have to glad hold that piece of dirt, all of our venues are, privately owned with owners. So you have to have relationships with literally every venue. There's where the resources come in. You have to have bodies. And what we said is, well, we can't financially set up offices across the country in every small city. And that's why we started franchising in 1994. And that was with AJ Indoor. That carried over to Oliver Media. And that's our wheelhouse today with Social Indoor. And it was really just because ours is so relationship driven for these venues.
That's so interesting because we've talked about this before, but I feel like you're the Ray Kroc of indoor advertising because you've really gone from McDonald's, going from burgers to recognizing it's really a real estate company, and that's really what you are doing, right? You're setting up the real estate and the financing so that people can come in and build the relationships that you're talking about.
You nailed it. About a year ago, I was sitting in my office kind of racking my head. I'm like, how can we get into these larger markets? And our struggle was we had a crazy non-compete. I had a former company that had a 10-year non-compete, arguably illegal. Took us 6 years to get out of it. So we got out of that in late 2024. And we thought, oh gosh, our non-compete's done. We're going to sell franchises in all these large cities because we were prohibited prior to that. But what we found is it was still just a challenge to find someone who could take on a Chicago. So I was racking my head and I literally thought of the movie The Founder, and that is the total inspiration for what we're doing right now. When he said we're not in the hamburger business, we're in the real estate business. And I thought, yes, we're in the media business, but we're really in the digital deployment business, if you will. So what we did is we found a way, and after talking to numerous franchise brokers, what we also discovered is there's far more people with far more money who want to own a franchise, but not necessarily work. So for instance, the guy who buys 3 McDonald's for $6 million, you're probably not going to see him behind the kitchen flipping burgers. Mm-hmm. Whereas the window washer franchise is probably an owner operator model, way less funded. So we've created these tandem investment groups, we call them, and it was a way for taking investor groups to open up these cities. And that's what we're doing right now. And it's allowing us to open up these markets. And so we still run, operate, manage the entire process, but we create these franchises that are held rather than one person. It's maybe an LLC of 15 people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So right now, going through this process, tell us about what's on your leaders list. Like, how are you prioritizing all of the change that comes with rolling out this new concept, going into new markets, expanding, introducing training, relationships, all this new stuff? What's on your leaders list specifically?
I wish I could find one thing that always worked, but I haven't been able to do that. I do know as of late, when we open up these cities, we've been hiring what we thought was, hey, let's hire these very experienced outdoor people or radio people or what have you. And I'm not knocking any of those industries, but I will say we are not order takers. We are ham and eggers. We're grinders, right? So we don't get a zillion RFPs all the time. So our people have to be out hustling all the time. And that's a little bit contrary to what some of these other media companies deal with, where they're more of an account management system. So that's the one challenge. And after COVID, I almost had given up on anybody who was 20 to 25 because I'm like, oh my gosh, they've just been destroyed from COVID on a work ethic, everything. And just recently, in the last 8 months, we hired a young 22-year-old girl named Josie who's just killing it. And I was like, God, why is she doing so well? And I had a talk with her and I said, tell me about your life. And she's like, well, my dad owned a business. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I said, how'd it go? She goes, oh, it was a lot of ups and downs. And I'm like, well, was it table talk at dinner? She's like, every night. And then I knew her uncle, Eric, and he said, did he ever stop by? Because he was with iHeartRadio, and he's the one who actually called me to see if I would hire his niece, Eric Christopherson. And she said he was there all the holidays. And I'm like, did they talk business? I'm like, all the time. And I'm like, okay, enough said. So she kind of understood just how tough it is sometimes to be out there and you have to actually do the work. So one is hiring people is always been a challenge and still remains, right? Because I could hire the greatest outdoor salesperson who might fall flat on their face. So there's challenge one. Challenge two is we believe that, we've got this product that is gender specific. It's a captive audience. It's vetted. It's Geopath audited. Same company that audits the outdoor billboard companies audit us. But yet we're still very low on the totem pole, right? So we're trying to get our name out there, but we're trying to be a little more aggressive and say, get over your ego, people. I understand it's in the bathroom, but our CPM on our eyeballs for the exact eyeballs that aren't, looking at 20 other media things, they're just looking at you. It's about half to sometimes as much as 10 times less on a CPM cost for the exact same eyeballs. So driving that message has been challenging. But the biggest thing that probably challenges us right now is we need to get more government and national business. Right now we're surviving off these, local type businesses that are, a State Farm agent, realtor, a car dealership, right? And then we sprinkle in some national business. But our footprint's getting bigger and bigger. So we're an ideal customer for national products, especially if it's a gender specific national product. And that's what we're trying to attract more government and national business. We get government business very well in Minnesota because we're in the Twin Cities, but we're also in St. Cloud, Duluth, Rochester, Brainerd, et cetera, Mankato. And that's also what we're building across the country. We're starting with large markets. Then we're marketing the fact that we franchise in these other cities, in the smaller cities, because we want to populate. So when we open up Detroit, our end game is to populate Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, Lansing, et cetera. Same thing with Phoenix and using Flagstaff and Tucson, et cetera. So we want to go into the big markets, tell our story, and say, by the way, there's also franchises available in this city or throughout the state.
Yeah. So Tony, if I understand that correctly, the focus for you right now is people, PR, and industry expansion. There's, like finding that right niche. This will sound, I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but like you've been doing this for a long time. Finding the right people is interesting that that's still on your list. Is that because the industry has changed, or do you think it's a generational thing where truly generation has changed?
I think a little bit of everything for sure. I think that the younger group has changed. I think it's very hard to find someone who wants to be like, here's our typical salesperson now. If you mention straight commission, that's like, what? Most salespeople want to make 75K or more and then get a big commission. Where, 34 years ago, it wasn't like that. You know what I mean? People said, I'm a sales guy. I want to eat what I kill and I want to make as much as I can. I think people now just say, I want to make this much and they kind of stop. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I'm just saying it's been more challenging finding salespeople in that sort of bucket, if you will.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, Tony, because I think to myself, like what you just did, and this is for our listeners to pay attention to, you identified the variable that works for you and your industry. Like literally, you're thinking to yourself, okay, when I go and I hire, I want to see some entrepreneurial nature in that individual. I want to see that they grew up in that environment, or I want to see that they understand that. Or, is there a grit that exists that is different? Because I think it's always interesting to me when we work with companies to try and replicate success. That's the key, right? It's always easy to find one lucky thing that happened to work, but when you can repeat it, that's an incredible advantage. And so that's just one of those things I think I would take away from that is like, how do I formulate that to go now find that talent instead of hoping that the right one comes? So just something to consider.
I would agree. Hiring is always going to be a challenge. In fact, we just had a couple top level management hires. And it was kind of like my gut said within a month or two, I'm like, I'm not quite sure they're cut out for this just because this is such a hustle and it's just an aggressive, right? And they just unfortunately didn't work out. But you definitely have to have someone, and they also have to think outside the box. Like we are not, just check this box and it's an easy thing. Our medium, when you first think restroom advertising, pretty simple, but it's actually really complicated. There's women's boards, there's men's boards, there's TV screens in the common areas, there's print, there's digital, there's all these different things. Do you want the lake areas? So you're always talking about stuff. Our biggest thing is we've been building on this inventory for quite a while, but we haven't been raising our hand to get on RFPs, and now we're making that push to let everybody know we're here. So it's
Nice.
like, hey, if you want a great deal on a media space, we are absolutely it. And as far as a franchisee goes, we've also struggled with those, right? Just like every other franchise company, when we first started, we took a check from anybody who could breathe. And that shot us in the leg, right? Because it's like, okay, that wasn't the right person, even though we kind of knew it, right?
Yeah.
But it was about survival at that stage. Well, the franchisees that succeed the most are they're not even media people. Our best franchisee came from Boston Scientific. He was a 31-year-old logistics guy, and he's knocking it out of the park just because he's so service oriented. He understands the inventory. The biggest thing he said that resonates, and he was in one of our training sessions, and he came in there, and everyone would say, well, how did you do what you did? And he's like, well, I just followed the system. And it took me by surprise. I'm like, well, what system was that? Because I've been pitching this system forever, and no one's ever did what he did. But something that resonated, he said, when I call someone and they don't respond back, I don't take that as a no until I track that person down. And it might take 6 times, but I'm going to get an absolute no from that person, which is way better than me thinking they said no, because it might turn into a yes. And I think today's salespeople stop at that first call. I can't tell you how many times I'll have reps say, what they say, oh, they're not interested. And I later learned they never even responded back. And a rep just assumed that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of people you have to find. You have to find hustlers for this business.
So, Tony, it's super interesting that you've already started giving us some things that our listeners can think about as they're growing and scaling their companies. But what are some other things that we should put on our leaders list?
Sure. So let's talk about Barter. So I always use this example. I said, have you flown lately? And a lot of people say, sure, I flew last week. Okay. Was there any empty seats? And if they say 2 or 3 empty seats, I say, guess what? As soon as that door closes, that's lost revenue. So I view that as lost revenue at the start of every month. So that's why we've incorporated Barter into our programs for corporate and our franchisees. Because if you're signing up a customer and you can double their program by throwing in gift cards or throwing in a Barter or something like that, we're sort of in the entertainment business because we use that Barter then and we back channel it back to our venue partners. Sometimes as part of compensation, we package them into deals. And in fact, my pitch when I sell a franchise to any given person would be, if you do this right, when you're said and done, you should never have to pay for an haircut, a tea time, an oil change, or a car wash again. It's a lifestyle business, but I've done this for 39 years. If Barter wasn't in this mix, 100% I would not be doing this, because it's that shiny quarter part of this business that makes it a little different every day. And I could probably write a book on all the crazy things we've bartered over the years.
I think that's so interesting to just recognize that every company has assets. And if the assets go unused, it is a waste. It's classic load management or demand side management, whatever you want to call it. So I love the fact that you've looked at that and recognized like payment comes in multiple ways. Certainly you prefer the check, but like you said, how do you start to become part of a community and connect? And I think anybody who has worked in advertising on a regional or local level understands this, that, that media is a good relationship tool. But I think that's applicable for a lot of businesses. It's just recognizing your assets, recognizing that when they go unused, it is a waste. And there's other ways to be able to benefit the business. So I thought that was really smart.
And furthermore with that, we're in a unique situation that my print cost is relatively inexpensive, and I already have the fixed cost of the guy going out every month, right? So that lends to Barter, but it also lends to tons of charities and bonuses and things like that. So I'll oftentimes, with larger customers, I'll sprinkle in, and let's say a customer signs a deal with me for $3,000 a month for a year. It would be 100% normal for me to say, hey, by the way, what's your favorite charity? And they might say United Way. And I'd say, would you object if I call United Way in Minnesota and say, I'm going to run an $18,000 ad program for you, sponsored by customer X? And they'd be like, well, what does that cost? I'm like, it's absolutely free. It's just my thank you that you're a customer of mine. I have some extra space. I'll turn that into now. I've had some customers that have literally said they like that part better than they like the media space in some cases, because the feel
Right.
good part of sponsoring something like a charity is really good for the community, and they appreciated that. So we are also, I use my space for barter. I use it for a ton of bonus ads. We don't have a customer on our boards that we don't over deliver. And that's 100%, meaning that no matter what you buy, you're going to get extra all the time. That's part of our mantra. And we do a ton of charity. We also bring in, like when Chuck Norris died, all our boards have a tribute ad, Hulk Hogan, etc. So we bring in random non political content. We don't want to get divisive, things like that. But we'll bring in dad jokes. We'll bring in tribute ads, things like that. But we want to make these boards, I won't say entertaining, but definitely where you keep reading them while you're there.
Totally. But that kind of redefines or it reminds us that you guys are thinking nationally but acting locally. And I do think that that's an important part to recognize, is that each market is different. Everything you do in those markets is different. You have literally sub-geographies where you just said, like, lakeside experience is different than an urban and city experience. And so yeah, it's a powerful medium. It makes a ton of sense. For people to consider. But I love the franchise model that you guys are going after. And I think that's, your relationship orientation makes that kind of a natural move for you, because
Yeah.
you are that type of person, right? So you're going to have that good connection. It's just going to be the franchisee instead of the bar owner. So that's
And the win,
very
I
cool.
always say our business is a win-win-win, because I want to win, but I want my customers to win, and I want our venues to win, right? So we're dealing
Sure.
with three different entities all the time. The
Yeah.
venues, even though they're our expense, that's how we make our money, right? So everything is free to the venue, and part of our pitch from the venue, I'll just show you this. Just 'cause I like this picture in particular. Like that's in a country bar called Cowboy Jack's. I mean, we can take a bar that looks like that, or we can take a bar that's a place called Hazelwoods. I mean, we can make the best bathroom or the worst bathroom look better. Like, so our
Yeah.
product is incredibly aesthetic. So we're also looking for national chains. So if you own a restaurant chain out there, we absolutely want to work with you across the country. So that's another big play with us. We want to start working more with more Buffalo Wild Wings, more Texas Roadhouses, et cetera, across the country.
That's awesome,
And for
Tony.
them, it's all free, and they get a part of the board to run their in-house messages, et cetera, and no non-competing ads.
Yep. Yep. Well, listen, everybody who's listening right now, hopefully they take away that barter concept and just think about the assets they have and their own load management or demand side management, and how they're benefiting from that. The other thing I would ask is, as everybody gets done listening to this, and I know that they've listened through the entire thing because it's riveting, but after this, when they stop listening, what's one or two things that they should go do immediately?
Well, if you're ever interested in owning your own business, I mean, we have plenty of cities available. You should go on our website, www.socialindoor.com.
Yep.
But I maybe I'm not missing the question what they should do
No,
pertaining to
listen,
this.
so I'm scaling my business. I'm just like
Yep.
you. I've been around for a while, and now I want to grow my business, and I want to be a great leader like you. Just what's a quick and easy thing that you do each day, or something that you do in your personal life that you go, man, if you're not doing this, you should do it.
Um, well, we just recently opened up like 4 cities at once, to the
Yeah.
chagrin of some of our board members. And they said, why not just do one? I'm like, well, because I get scale here and I get this. And in hindsight, I should have listened, right? Because it's been really, really taxing. I said, so first, take on what you can take on and manage, because it's
Mhm.
very easy to overexpand really quickly. And all of a sudden you're sitting there like, oh my gosh, I've got all this inventory now. And now I'm going through hiring and firing and all these different things. Um, nail down what works and then replicate it one at a time versus like 5 at a time. That would
Right.
probably be one that's sort of given me some angst in the last year. I'm glad we're doing it, but it has it's had its challenges for sure. Um, I think business you gotta like what you're doing. You gotta enjoy it. Even like oftentimes a person look at a franchise and I'm like, what's the best city I should buy? And I'm like, there is no best city. The best city you should buy is where you want to live, because you're going to thrive where
Mm.
you want to live. You're not going to thrive just because you think you should live in Napa Valley and all of a sudden it's a challenge, right? So part of that is really maybe looking at yourself and say, what do you want out of yourself, and be real about
Mm.
it. Because I've been wrong multiple times, and I kick back and I'm like, gosh, that was not really what I, even if I got the results I wanted, it's created a bigger challenge for me, So we are scaling our business, to be sort of a very locally driven business, but we're also an immediate answer that, let's say you have a product that's in 20 states, here we are. Like, we can sprinkle in those buys very easily, almost seamlessly with our digital, right? So maybe I'm not answering that question very clearly, but
No, that's
I would
great.
say don't overgrow too fast, because we've done that multiple times, and then we got to reel back in and figure it out.
It's good. I think my favorite part of that is you started off talking about how you listened to advisors and they were wrong. And then you ended with you got some advice from an advisor you should have listened to.
Oh
And
yeah, yes.
I think that's great. There's a level of discernment that has to come with business, but you're also going to make a decision. And when you make that decision, you got to run with it. And I think you've proven that. You've done a great job. And I just really appreciate you being on the show so that everybody can learn from the experience that you've had, Tony.
Yeah, and I appreciate it very much.